Hey, how's it going? And today we're taking a look at what a class is in Verse and how to create one, and how, if we do create one, how do we access it and what it would be used it for and things like that. So if you're not familiar with Verse programming or programming in general, you can always go onto their website. They have this really good documentation that talks about what a class is, that a class is a template for creating objects with similar behaviors and properties. So here we are in the Unreal Editor for Fortnite, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to start from the very beginning because we're creating something a little different. We're going to come up here to the Verse Explorer. We're going to click on My Project, left click, right click, and go Add a New Verse Project. Instead of normally we go Create here, what we're going to do is I'm just going to call this My Verse Class, and I'm going to go create empty. And it's going to be a little different than before, where you're not going to see a creative devices folder pop up or a creative device. There is no creative device. It's created this class here, and we can click here to click into it, and it's intimidating because it's completely blank. To make a class, actually to code a class, is very, very simple. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab the code because I have some other notes in here that I'd like to share with you. So let's just copy this, and then we'll just pop it in here. Okay, so this is how we create a class. It's underscored in between the words, so it's my first class. It looks a lot like a type, and a class is a composite type, so it is a form of a type. This particular class has one property, a variable named number, and one method that we call increase value. And I've made this as simple as possible. And this is what we use to create the actual class right here. So we just have the name, the inference operator, and then class, colon, and it creates a class. And then here's the variable here, one property, and then one method. They call it a method. And this method has no inputs and it's no outputs. And all it does is it's going to grab this number here when it's called and increment it by 1. And so down here I have some notes, just that a class is a template for creating objects that possess variables and methods. These are known as fields. It's a composite type. Variables are sometimes called properties. Properties are usually made private, while methods are usually made public. Methods are public by default. I actually don't need this transacts in there. I'm going to do another tutorial on that transacts specifier, but I wanted to do this tutorial first as kind of a primer for that. So that's all we got to do to create a class. It really couldn't be much simpler, that part of it. It's just understanding it conceptually. And now we come in here and let's go and create a creative device. So I'm going to left click, right click, add new verse file, and I'll just call this Hello World 1 device because I don't want to conflict with anything I've already done. And now I've got my creative device, and I can double click into it, double click here, and I have the code for this already, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of all this, Control V. And then let's just walk through this. So we have our modules. Here's where we create our creative device, and it's, as you can see, it's in a sense, a subclass, or it's inheriting from the creative device class. This is how we instantiate our class. So we've created this class right here. Now to access it or create a reference of it, an object of it that we can use, we have to do it this way. Now, one thing I discovered, if we're going to be calling the class from within a function, we need to set it up this way. You'll notice if I do this, and just have the inference operator, you'll notice I'm going to get an error. It says data definitions at class scope must specify their value domain. So we do want this at class scope so that we can call it from within any function that we create within our device here. So we've just got to go my first class equals pretty much the same way that we set up our creative devices, the same thing. Okay, and so here we create this very simple function. Again, no inputs, no outputs. It's just called my function. This is how we would reference or call a property, is we just put the name of the class that we've created, which is now the class my verse class, we're now referring to it as some class here that we named, and you can name this anything you want, but we're calling some class period number, and that's how we call it. Now to modify that value, if you want to be able to modify it, you would just go set some class.member equals whatever number, and then we can modify that about this value here. It's by default it's set to 0. We can change it to 12. We're changing it to 12 right here. So we're calling it and changing it to 12. Here we're just calling it, but we're not doing anything with it. Here we're calling it and setting it. Now to call a method is very similar. We just get the class name that we've given it here, dot increase value the method with the parentheses, just like we would call any function or method. Because this doesn't require any inputs or it has no output, we don't have to put anything inside the parentheses. And then what we can do is, if we want to grab this value, this is how we would gain access to it. We call it here, and then using this inference operator, we could give it a new value. And instead of using this to make things clearer, I could just type an int there, so that it's, we know that it's an integer value coming through. So, and here we just do a print string. So when this program starts, it's just going to make a function call here, and then it's going to call it over here. Now, why would you want to do this in the first place? Well, one of the main reasons, I think, like you have different departments in a business. You have like shipping and receiving, accounting, and all that. You would divide those up into their own classes and have those functions all over there. You wouldn't have them all in the executive suite. So you can think of this as the executive suite where the shots are being called, but the actual functions are occurring in the individual departments. So anyway, my question to you is, we're going to call on this to create a new value. What value do you think is going to print? So we know that it's set to 0 here, and we know that this function, this method, is going to increase that when it's called by 1. So it's 0, so when it's called, it's going to go to 1 if it's called. But initially it's set to 0. What number is going to print? So let's see. Some class number. Okay, so this calls it, references it, but it doesn't do anything. So this is just nothing really happening here. Here we're calling it and we're setting it to 12. Okay, so that's going to change something. So instead of this starting out as 0, it's going to start as 12. Okay. Now we're going to call this method. Okay, and that's going to bring in a 12 and increase it by 1. Instead of writing it this way, I could have also written it this way. And I realized when you're beginning, it's probably better to write things out longhand so it's clear, because it's easy to forget. So then we can do it that way. So it's going to be 12 and then add 1. And then we're going to take that value and assign it to new value. So if we follow the program flow through, it should say the value of number is 13. That's the number we should see. So let's see if that's what we see. I forgot one of the most important things. I forgot to drag this into the scene. Okay, so it's finally uploaded and updated. So let's hit start game and see what we see. The value of number is 13. That's right. That's exactly what we expected to see. So anyway, that's all I had today. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you next time.